And we're recording.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Well, welcome, museum families, and welcome to RBCM at Home Kids, a play date through screens across British Columbia and the world. The previous sessions, which we were just talking about, now this is the 8th month of us doing this, are all recorded, and you can find them on our Royal BC Museum YouTube page. My name's Chris O'Connor, and I'm a learning program developer here at the Royal BC Museum. As I said, the museum and my home is on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations here in Victoria on Vancouver Island. And today we're with Victoria. I'm an uninvited guest on this territory and grateful to live, learn, and raise a family on this land. So we are in the midst of a very festive season. A few weeks ago, many celebrated Diwali, a festival of lights celebrated by Hindus, Jains, and Sikhs around the world. Tomorrow night is the start of Hanukkah, another kind of celebration of light and resilience celebrated by Jewish communities around the world. In a few weeks is winter solstice, where we have the shortest day and the promise of renewal of sorts as the days start to get a little bit longer, little by little. And shortly after that, Christmas, and then in the African American communities, a celebration of Kwanzaa. So even in this most unusual year, there is a lot of celebration to do. Coming together, sharing gratitude, and also sharing food. Food is so important when we celebrate, and especially the food of cookies, or at least I think so. I'm a fan of cookies. So today, Royal BC Museum, RBCM at Home Kids is a cooking show, a baking show, where we'll be making festive Trilobite cookies to add to the season. And to do that, we have one of our favorite guests here at RBCM at Home Kids, who is returning for her 4th visit, which is a record and deserves some kind of prize.
I guess I'll just eat some of the cookies at the end.
Yeah, for sure. Dr. Victoria Arbour is the curator of paleontology, which is the study of fossils and things that lived long ago. Often we think of that as being dinosaurs, but of course there were many different kinds of animals and plants that lived long ago, including trilobites. So welcome, Victoria. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. And thank you for having me again. Oh, I just saw in the chat someone noticed my sweater. Yes, so I'm wearing my festive dinosaur Christmas sweater today. It seemed appropriate for making trilobite cookies. Yeah, so most of the work that I do as a paleontologist and a scientist is about dinosaurs. I love dinosaurs, but I'm pretty sure that everybody learns about trilobites. Everybody who's interested in dinosaurs and wants to be a paleontologist probably sees a trilobite, and trilobites are many of our first fossils because they're so common everywhere. So I have always really liked making trilobite cookies ever since I was a grad student. I make them at about this time of year. I think they're really cute and fun. And so yeah, today we're doing not just festive baking, but festive science baking. So we will also learn some science words, which should be fun, and we will make cute little trilobites that you can eat. So I think that's kind of fun. So I thought what I would do first is I would just go through the ingredients. It feels like a really long list, but it's actually pretty simple stuff. So if you need a few minutes to get things together, I'll go over the ingredients, and then I'll tell you guys a little bit about what a trilobite is and what exactly we're making. And just for those of you who have joined after, Chris and I were kind of chatting beforehand, but don't worry if you can't fully keep up with this. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit halfway through the magic of television, I guess. I have some cookies that are partway done because we have to wait for the cookies to bake and cool all the way down. We'd be here for a couple of hours. So, but everything's going to get recorded. So don't worry. We'll sort of make the first half together, and then I'll show you how to finish them off later on when your cookies are baked and cooled. So the things that we need today are, we're basically going to make shortbread cookies. So shortbread cookies are a super common recipe at this time of year, and they're very, very easy. And there's a couple of different versions that you can make. But the basic ingredients are butter, sugar, and flour. So they're not very good for you, but they taste very good. And so you'll basically need 2 cups of flour, and I like all-purpose flour, half a cup or maybe a bit more of sugar, and a whole cup of butter. And if it's supposed to be softened at room temperature, if you're like me and forgot to do that, you can just put it in the microwave for a little bit, and that is okay. I think they turn out maybe a little bit nicer the other way, but that is perfectly acceptable. And I always forget to soften butter ahead of time. So you're going to need those. You're going to need something to mix all those ingredients into. So I like having a nice bowl and a mixing spoon. You can use a stand mixer if you're very fancy and have that kind of thing. And then later, you're going to need some chocolate chips and a bowl that you can put in the microwave in order to melt those chocolate chips. So you're going to need like a spoon and a bowl that can go in the microwave. And then we finish them off with some little eyes. And I like to use little mini M&Ms. You can use more chocolate chips or butterscotch chips, anything that looks like a little eye that you can eat. Those little silver balls are really cute, but I don't think they taste very good. So I usually don't use those. So.
And just to let everyone know, we're going to put the whole list both in the chat on Zoom and in the comment section on Facebook Live. So if you didn't catch all of that, well,
yeah, sounds great. And you'll need a couple of surfaces to put things on, like a pan to put your cookies onto, and some wax paper is really good later when we do the dipping to make chocolate, because that gets very messy. So yeah, so that sounds like a whole lot, but we're going to do it step by step. So don't worry too much. It's pretty easy and very, very fun for everybody. So while you guys are getting your ingredients together and your supplies together, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what a trilobite is. So some of you, if you really like paleontology, might have seen trilobites before or know what a trilobite looks like, but some of you might not have. So a trilobite is an arthropod, which means it's in the same group of animals as like insects and spiders and crustaceans, so like crabs and shrimp, but they're their own unique kind of group. So they're not quite any of those things. Most of them are pretty small, which makes them really common and easy to find fossils. And I have a really cute model of a trilobite from the Burgess Shale. There are lots of trilobite fossils from British Columbia because we have rocks in the Burgess Shale on Mount Stephen that are just covered in layers of trilobites. So they're one of the most common fossils we can find in BC. You can also find lots of trilobites in Cranbrook, British Columbia, and also up north. Anywhere where the rocks are old enough and can have fossils in them, you might find a trilobite. And trilobites were some of the first fossils I ever saw when I was a little kid, so they're pretty cute.
Are they related to anything that we would see now?
They're sort of in the same general group as any like insects and spiders. I think they look a lot like horseshoe crabs, but they're not actually super close relatives of horseshoe crabs. So that's, whenever I see a horseshoe crab, I always think it looks a lot like a trilobite. Or if you've ever seen like those little like potato bugs or pill bugs, they kind of remind me of trilobites too. So trilobites are pretty cute. Most of them are pretty small. They have a hard shell, just like most insects and crabs do today. They can have antennae. Most of the time, these parts don't preserve. So you usually just get this exoskeleton, the shell that goes around them on the outside. And if you flip them over, they've got lots of little legs. So the legs usually don't fossilize. Under the legs, there's also some little gills. That's what's showing up as white in this picture. So they basically have this little shell and they crawl along the bottom and they filter food, and that's how they eat. Their stomach is actually in their head. So they have, their stomach sort of lives in this little blob here, and they sort of put all the food up towards their mouth. And so very different animals than us for sure. So today we're going to make trilobites, and we're going to learn a couple of fun trilobite words. So I made a little diagram for us. So trilobites get their name because they have 3 lobes. So trilobite. Just like tricycle has 3 wheels, trilobites have 3 lobes. And that's because you can sort of take a trilobite, you can make them 3 lobes this way, but it's actually referring to these 3 segments. So they've got a lobe down the center, and then another lobe. They have very fancy scientific names. They have plural lobes and an axial lobe. That just means it's going down the axis of the trilobite. The other parts that are really fun to learn about are the cephalon, which is basically the head. I always like that word. The thorax, which is the body with all these little segments. And then the pygidium, which is a really fun word to say, and it just means tail. The other fun things that they often have little spikes on the side of their head. These are called genal spines. We're going to make some on our trilobites because I think that's fun. And then they've got 2 little eyes. They have compound eyes, kind of crystalline eyes like insects do. And some of their eyes are really interesting because some of them actually like stick up off their head and have little like eye shades on them. So trilobites are really neat. They come in all different shapes and sizes. Some of them have lots of spikes. Some of them are pretty big. Some of them are almost 1 meter long, which is a really big arthropod. Most of them are pretty tiny, and their fossils are super common and easy to collect. So they're a lot of fun. So today we're going to basically make our 3-lobed trilobites. We're going to make them out of shortbread for their bodies. We're going to leave a smooth part for their cephalon and their pygidium, and we're going to make little thorax segments using a fork. So I think we should just like get started and put together some shortbread dough to start making our cookies. So for this part, you're going to need a mixing bowl and a spoon. And you're going to need some flour and some sugar and your butter. I'm going to roll up my sleeves for this so I don't get too dirty, but I will probably get a little bit dirty, to be honest, because I pretty much always get flour on myself.
So
whenever I bake.
People might need an apron.
Yes, aprons are great. I never think that I have an apron at work for when I'm preparing fossils, and I don't have an apron at home for when I'm preparing food. So that's an oversight on my part.
I noticed you have a dinosaur socks and a sweater and a bag and other things. Do you have a dinosaur apron or no?
I have a dinosaur apron for when I'm at work, yes.
Oh, okay.
But not one for at home, which is very silly of me. So I'm going to put in a 1/2 cup of sugar first. So I've got my little measuring cup. I'm going to put in some sugar. And if you put in a little extra sugar, that's okay. This is a pretty forgiving recipe. So I find it's really good to mix the sugar and the butter first together because that makes them dissolve. Let me get this all out of here. Boop. It feels like a lot of butter, but that's what makes them taste really good. All right, and so I'm just going to mix it up. Let me see if I can hold it up here. This might be a little hard, so you'll have to forgive me if I can't always show the camera. Try not to dump it all over my laptop. All right, so that's pretty easy. So you've taken your butter and sugar and you've mixed those together. And then we're going to add our flour. So we're going to put 2 cups of flour into that. I'm just going to lean over here. Pardon me, everybody. 1 cup of flour without getting too messy. 2 cups of flour. And you can make a different amount if you want. If you want to make a little bit less, you can make 1/2 of all of these ingredients. If you want to make a different type of cookie later, I've seen people make these out of peanut butter cookies. I saw someone had peanut butter cookies as their favorite. And now we're going to mix them up. This part might be a little bit harder, so you might have to just work at it for a little bit and get it to all come together. It's going to look a little bit crumbly, and that's okay. You can also use your hands to mix everything together at the end if it's not coming together quite perfectly. I already got flour on myself, everyone, so I hope you are faring a little bit better than I am. All right, this is starting to look pretty good. So I just mixed it for a few minutes and you can already see it's a little bit crumbly. The thing that's kind of fun about baking is it's kind of like science too, right? I mean, chemistry is all about measuring out ingredients and following instructions, and that's kind of what baking is like too. So some cooking is like an art and some cooking is like a science, and I think baking falls a little bit more maybe on the laboratory science side of things. Oh, I should also mention, if you're making this part at home, now is a really good time to turn your oven on. And you're going to bake these at 350 Fahrenheit. And I didn't convert that to Celsius because I always think about cooking in terms of Fahrenheit. So hopefully you have the ability to figure that out, or your oven has both Fahrenheit and Celsius on it. So 350, and that way it can preheat, and when you're ready to put your cookies in, they'll be all ready.
I just looked it up. It's 177 degrees Celsius.
Perfect. That's very precise. I'm not sure I would get it quite that right. Okay, so that didn't take me too long. If your butter was a little bit harder, it might take you a few more minutes to get everything mixed. So it's going to look a little bit crumbly, which is just fine because we're going to then take our hands and squish them into little circles. So I'm going to take a squidge of this, and I'll show you up around the camera what I've done. So I've taken about that much dough. It's going to be a little bit crumbly, and you're just going to use your hands to kind of squish it together. This reminds me of all of the ones I've done before where we played with Play-Doh. Now we're just going to eat it later. So I'm going to take it and make it into a little bit of a rough oval or circle. And I find you can't quite roll the dough like you would roll Play-Doh. So you might have to just squish it a little bit until it looks like a good shape. So I'm going to make a couple of different shapes, but here's one example. I've just got like a little oval. I'm going to make just a couple more of different shapes, and then I'll show you the next step. All right. And you can make big ones or small ones. So you can make them a bit bigger than I'm making. I'm going to make a very circular one. If they have some cracks in them, that happens sometimes. I made some the other day and they had a lot of cracks in them because I must have just not mixed it together quite right, but they still tasted good. If they have cracks, that's okay because fossils have cracks in them. So they'll just be even more authentic trilobite fossils. So don't worry if they get some cracks or if they aren't like totally perfect or if they're a little asymmetrical or smushed or weird looking. Most fossils are not perfect, beautiful things. So
that's a great way to frame that.
Oh, what's that?
That's a good way of thinking about that. So
it is, yes. So they don't have to be absolutely perfect. So I'm just making a couple of different shapes. Trilobites come in lots of different shapes. Most of them are sort of circular or oval. Some of them have like a wider end and a pointier end. So I'm going to try to make one of those, but I'm having some crumbling problems. So let's see if I can do it. Yeah, so maybe like a teardrop shape. So you can see he's kind of fatter at one end and thinner at the other. And I'm going to make one more for now. I still have lots of dough left. So I can make, this is probably going to make at least like 10, like 15 or so trilobites if I make them of this size. You want them to be sort of big enough that you feel like you've eaten a cookie, but not so big that it becomes too much butter and sugar all at once. All right, there's another trilobite, a sort of a naked trilobite right now, I guess. And this part's a little bit tricky, but I think is pretty fun. This is where we're going to put those little ridges on the segments. And this, I'll show you one, and you can kind of follow along if you're making them at the same time. So we're going to take our trilobite. You're going to hold it very gently in your hand, and you're not going to put you've got a fork. I just use a regular fork. If you have a fancier implement, that's great. I'd like to keep it pretty simple with these. So what you're going to do is you're going to put some of you're going to press the fork into it about halfway down. So you don't want to put your fork all the way at either end. You're going to start about halfway. Let's see if I can show. And you're not going to put the fork all the way into the middle of the trilobite either. You're just going to put it so that it leaves those three lobes. So you've got cephalon, thorax, pygidium, and then pleural lobe, axial lobe, pleural lobe, right? So there's our science terms. Let me turn this towards the camera so you can kind of see what I did. So you can see I pressed the fork in just in the middle part and not all the way to the center. If you have a really big cookie, you might need to poke your fork a couple of times. Mine are small enough where just one fork press seems to work pretty well. I'll do it again here. So press one side, press the other side. And mine crumbled a little bit, but that's okay. Some of them are going to crumble. There you go. And if you want to get fancy, you can kind of angle a little bit. So maybe I'll make one where they're sort of angled back a little bit, and maybe they go even a little bit further down onto the tail, onto the pygidium. There's another example. But you always want to leave a nice smooth part for the head, for the cephalon. That's very important. So when I was first learning about this recipe, I actually found a recipe where instead of shortbread, they used press cookies. I don't know if people make press cookies anymore, but I used to make press cookies with my mom when I was little. And so it's sort of this squishier, wetter dough, and then you've got this fancy like tube and different little like attachments that go onto the top of it. And when you squeeze the dough through, it sort of makes this really cool pattern. So we used to have all kinds of cool patterns, and you can get sort of presses for it that look a lot like trilobites when you squeeze it out. So if you have a press cookie machine, you could also try making press cookies. That's a lot of fun. But this works pretty well, all things considered. Considering I'm not fancy enough to have a press cookie machine at this point. So how's everyone feeling? I could keep making trilobite cookies, but I think I might do my time jump now and show you how to do the chocolate dipping part. So maybe I'll jump ahead there. But if you want to keep making Trilobite cookies with your hands, you can keep doing that, or you can take a break and you can watch what I'm doing for the next part. When your Trilobite cookies are all done, so this is,
just
what was that?
For a second, Victoria, just Tina on Facebook says, Victoria is such a good presenter. You can see why she's been on 4 times.
Oh, thank you, Tina. That's so nice. I certainly like presenting with everyone, and I like seeing what everyone has made afterwards and hearing about how creative people. I'm always so impressed with how creative people are, because everyone will show their creations afterwards. They'll share them with us, and I just really love seeing what everybody has made. And I hope everyone learned something new about whatever we're talking about each week. So when you're at this point, this is basically, you're done, you're at like the halfway point on Trilobite cookies when you've done this part. So you've made your sort of shell, your body, you've got your thoracic segments put in, you've got a nice smooth cephalon and pygidium and the axial lobe. And now they basically can go in the oven, and they will bake in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes. So everyone's oven is a little bit different. And you can tell when they're done because your kitchen will smell really good. And if they're just a little bit brown at the bottom, that's perfect. You don't want them to be really, really brown. If they get a little too brown, it's okay. They're still good to eat. But you should probably check on them in about 15 minutes. And they might need a little bit longer, depending on how big they are, how much butter is in them. Then you're going to want to let your Trilobite cookies cool all the way down. So you don't want to work with warm Trilobite cookies for the next part, because it will not work, because we're going to be putting warm chocolate onto them. And if the cookie is still warm and you put warm chocolate on, chocolate will just go everywhere and it will be a huge, hilarious disaster, but they won't look like very good Trilobite cookies. So you're going to want to let them sit on a cooling rack. You might even want to put them in the fridge and have them be nice and cold for the next part. But certainly you can't do this next part right after they come out of the oven. So that's why we're going to jump ahead a little bit. I'm going to wipe some of the butter off my hands for this next part, because these are really buttery, and my hands are really dirty now. Yours are probably very dirty too. All right, so you've got your Trilobite cookies, you're gonna put them in the oven, you're gonna wait a little while, and then you're gonna come back, and through the magic of television, i.e. I made some last night, you're gonna have some nice Trilobite cookies that are all baked up. Like I said, mine came out a little bit crumbly, so they might sort of flatten out a little bit and spread out a little bit as you bake them. I made a couple of different sizes.
You talked about the bottoms being browned a little bit.
Yeah, they're just a little bit browned. I maybe let them in just a little bit too long, so they don't even have to be quite this brown. You can sort of tell when they're sitting there that they'll be a little bit brown on the edges. So if they're at about that level of brown, they're pretty good. You can take them out of the oven at that point. All right, let me move some things around because this part gets a little bit messy. So if you have never melted chocolate before, it's actually not that hard. But if you are a young person watching this, you definitely want to have a grown-up with you, because it can be a little bit dangerous and it's very easy to burn chocolate. So what you're going to need for the next part is chocolate chips of some kind. I realized I have like Hershey's Kisses Chip-Its, and I was really excited because those taste amazing. And you're going to need a bowl. Now, I also tried to prepare this a little bit early. Let's see how it did. I put it under a tea cozy. Let's see if it stayed mostly melted or if I need to put it back in the microwave. So this is what you want to have. You want to have something that looks like this. It actually stayed really warm. Good job, tea cozy. So you're going to dump in maybe like a cup of chocolate chips. You can always melt some more. But if you make way too much, then you just have to eat it at the end, which is, I mean, a huge tragedy. So to melt chocolate chips in the microwave, it's actually not too hard. What you do is you put them in for like 10 or 20 seconds at a time, and you stir them a whole lot. So this is why you need a bowl that's safe to put in the microwave. The bowl will probably get hot, so you might want to have some oven mitts or like a pot holder or something ready. And you're just going to keep putting it in for like 10 seconds at a time. Don't put it in for a really long time, because the chocolate will probably burn. And after a couple of those, and you keep stirring it, you'll notice the chocolate all kind of starts to melt very quickly, suddenly, and then you're ready. So you want nice melted chocolate, because we're going to dip things. This is the part that also gets really messy, so I'm pretty sure chocolate is going to get on my laptop, which is okay. I've planned for that. This is where you're going to want a big pan or a big plate. So I've got a big baking sheet here just so that I've got some space. And this is where you're going to want some parchment paper or wax paper, because otherwise the chocolate will stick right to the plate. And then it's really hard to get the cookie off later on without breaking the cookie. So that's a really important part. And we're also going to need some eyes. So because it's Christmas, I have picked out red and green M&Ms. I can never get the right direction when I'm trying to show things on my laptop.
Yeah, we could.
I really like mini M&Ms, and I could not find mini M&Ms anywhere to save my life this week. So we're going to use regular M&Ms, so they'll just have nice big eyes. But like I said, you can use chocolate chips or butterscotch chips, anything that's kind of like, you know, small and round and eye-shaped. And red and green is pretty fun at this time of year because they end up looking very festive and Christmassy. All right, so if you've got your chocolate melted, you've got eyes ready to go, and you've got your cool Trilobite cookies, not warm Trilobite cookies, you are ready to dip. And I think this is a really fun part, and it also gets pretty messy. And sometimes it's helpful to have two people ready to help put eyes on. So I'm going to get a couple of eyes out and ready to stick on, and I'm going to try dipping so that you guys can see without making a huge mess. So wish me luck here. All right, so we've got our chocolate. I'm going to move this spoon out here actually for right now. I won't lick it right now though. All right, so you're going to take your Trilobite cookie and hold it by the pygidium, the tail, and you're going to dip the cephalon or the head into the chocolate. When you dip it in, you're going to dip it and tip it a little bit. So you're going to sort of stick it in, dip it forward so that it gets a nice sort of like nice deep sort of covering over the top of it. And then I like to roll it a little bit from side to side to make those genal spines. Not all Trilobites have them, so you can definitely make it without them. There's usually a little bit of chocolate that wants to stay on, and that's okay. Ta-da! And now it basically looks like a Trilobite, which is pretty fun. And while the chocolate is still warm, I'm going to put
eyes yet. No.
It's got to get some eyes. So we put some eyes on, and there's your Trilobite cookie. And now you basically just have to wait a little bit until the chocolate cools. So I can make a couple more. What's really fun is your different shapes will all have a little bit of a different personality. So I'll show that again. So I've got a little bit of a smaller one this time. So I'm going to hold him by his tail, dip his head in, sort of dip it forward, tip it from side to side. Give it a little swirl to get the chocolate off and without dropping it everywhere. And this one I'm going to make him have, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to give him stand-up eyes. So some Trilobites have these really funny eyes that stick straight up. Let's see if I can make it work. This one might fall over a bit, but it mostly works. We'll see if that holds. So some of them, like I said, have these eyes that stick straight up and even have a little shade over them. So you can do that. And you can also make Trilobites that don't have any of those spines. Some of them just have very, very small ones. So you can just do that. Very simple. So that in that case, you would just tip it forward and not tip it from side to side. This one really wants to have the chocolate stay on. So there's an example where we've just put the chocolate on one side. You can mix up the colors of the eyes. Let's maybe give this one a red eye and a green eye. That's always fun. I put them really close together this time, so he's pretty cute. And you can see how they have a little bit of chocolate sticking off of them, and that's why this wax paper is super important. So there you have it. That's Trilobite cookies. They're pretty simple cookies to make. They're a lot of fun.
You want to show the plate with the multiple ones just to see?
Yeah, I'll finish this one, and then I will hold the plate up so you guys can see them. I'm going to make one more with green eyes, because I like the green. Do you guys think different colored M&Ms taste better? I always think the red and green ones taste pretty good. All right, so there's another Trilobite. I've got a couple different shapes. I'm going to carefully hold it up so that they don't roll off. But there you have it. There's some Trilobite cookies. Maybe I'll move it this way. You can see they've got those spikes on the side. One of them has eyes that stand up. Most of them have flat eyes. And some of them have the big spikes. Some of them have little spikes. Some of them have big bodies, some of them have little bodies. You can look up pictures of trilobites online if you want to get creative and try experimenting with different shapes or different sort of ornaments, like different spikes or things. Some trilobites are very spiky, and I haven't figured out a good way to make very spiky trilobite cookies, but I bet if you're very creative, there's probably a really fun way to do it. But I really like doing this. The chocolate will take a little while to set, so you want to leave them alone. If you live somewhere cold, you can put them outside if animals won't get them. I used to live in an apartment in Edmonton when I was in grad school, so I would just put things on my balcony because it was like -30 outside, and then they were done in a few minutes. But you can put them in your fridge, and then the chocolate will get nice and hard. It won't be as shiny anymore, so when the chocolate is still really shiny, it's not quite ready. You want it to be kind of like a flat matte color. And then they're ready to eat. And I like to eat them head first, but you can eat them whatever way you want.
So Melissa has a question, Victoria, saying, can you use pretzels for spikes?
Oh, that's an interesting idea. I have never tried that before. So maybe you can experiment with that and send us some pictures and let us know if it worked.
And speaking of that, I put in the chat, and Jenny, if you could put in the Facebook Live comments section, my email address, because like Victoria said, it's such a pleasure to get to see images of what you've created at home before you eat it, or you could take a picture of yourself eating it, whatever you'd like to send. Victoria and I would love to see what you created, see what your Trilobite family looks like.
Yes. And if you used a different type of cookie, like maybe you used a peanut butter cookie or a gingerbread cookie, or use different decorations for the eyes. There's all kinds of different things you can do. So this is the way I like to make them, but there's definitely, you can make all kinds of variants of trilobite cookies.
And would they hang out in groups?
So trilobites, that's a good question. I don't know if trilobites hung out in groups a lot. They were really, really common in some places. So if you went to British Columbia like 500 million years ago, and you went and you looked at the ocean floor, I guess I should be really clear that these guys live in the ocean. A lot of animals like this live in the ocean, and that's why they preserve so well, because they're constantly getting buried by like sediment in the sea, and then their bodies get buried. So if you went back and you went to kind of like the sea floor, you would probably see lots of little trilobites sort of like scurrying around on the bottom, eating the detritus, sort of filtering all the little things with their little feet and gills and moving them up to that mouth that's actually sort of in their head underneath their eyes. One of the reasons trilobite fossils are so common is because like insects and other arthropods today, they have to shed their shell, their exoskeleton, in order to grow. So our skeletons are on the inside of our body, so we can just grow and we don't shed our skin in order to get bigger. But things like spiders can only really get bigger by sort of molting their old skin and kind of crawling out and being like a fresh new body. So one of the reasons we find so many trilobite fossils is because a lot of them are those shed exoskeletons. So it's not necessarily a dead trilobite, it's just its old skin that it has cast away. So that's why a lot of trilobite fossils are maybe just the body or the head, and that's probably a skeleton or an exoskeleton that got shed while the trilobite was still alive.
Can you tell the difference between the two?
Sometimes you can. So if you find a trilobite that's really complete, it probably was a trilobite that died. So that was its sort of final body, its final form, I guess. If you find a trilobite that's missing those spines on the head or some of the cheeks on its face, so they have little cheeks, they have all these little like lines. So basically when they're molting, these sort of lines on their face kind of give way, and then they sort of crawl out through the cephalon end, and then they have this new shell that hardens up. So if the face is kind of broken apart a bit, that's probably a shed skin or a molted skin of a trilobite. Mm. So that's pretty cool. So you can find lots of those. Yeah, unlike us, where we only really leave one skeleton in the fossil record at a time, trilobites can leave lots.
And we did have comments from both Jeremiah and Lucian earlier, just saying how they both found fossils at different times over the last couple of years, and how exciting it is to find a fossil. So, and that's your whole life. Well, not your whole life, Victoria, but that's a big part of what you do for your career is to look for and study fossils. So, and make
cookies. So yeah. But yeah, for sure, it's a big part of what we do. And that's what's so cool about paleontology is that even people who haven't trained as a paleontologist can find fossils and sometimes find really important discoveries.
Yeah. So maybe some of you out there will do that in the future too. So thank you so much, Victoria, for coming back again, and I wish you well in this festive season.
Yes.
And I wish everyone out there as well a very festive season coming up. Again, next week we have a visit from Father Christmas, which is super exciting. And then after that, we'll take a few weeks break before we come back in the beginning of January. So thanks again, Victoria.
Thanks.
And so we'll stop our Facebook Live feed, which we just did, and the